Hello everybody, this is Brittany at Ingleside Imaginarium coming to you with what will hopefully be my very first finishing tutorial video. So this video is going to be all about how to finish your cross stitch piece into a small hanging ornament like this one. Specifically, this tutorial will be for the Ingleside Imaginarium Magical Menagerie patterns. As you can see, we have the very first one here. This is the Magical Menagerie Griffin pattern, and it is all finished into a hanging ornament. I have backed it onto some mat board and made a backing and a hanger for it, so it can be hung just like a hanging menagerie cage. And hopefully by the end of this video, we're going to have two more of these fellas. The Phoenix and the Unicorn. But you can apply this finishing tutorial for any other stitching you might have that you want to turn into this kind of finish. I will say up front that the process of using mat board and kind of a sandwich finish I did get from Vanna the Twisted Stitcher, and her took inspiration from her flat fold tutorial. So I've taken that and kind of run with it and finished this up the way that I wanted to. So the very first thing that you're going to need to do to turn your stitch into a hanging ornament like this one is to figure out the dimensions that you need to cut your mat board. If you are stitching the Magical Menagerie patterns, you will have some templates included in your pattern to finish them up. So long as you have stitched it on the recommended fabric. This is a hand-dyed 32 count, so it's going to be a little smaller than your average 32 count, but it should be very easy for you to increase or decrease the size of your pattern, your template, if you're stitching this. If you are stitching your own piece, I will start from there to show you how you might figure out what size to make your mat board. So let's say that we are trying to figure out the dimensions of our unicorn here. You can see that it is a symmetrical pattern, or at least the cage is symmetrical. So that's going to make it a little easier on us. This is the type of ruler that I like to use. Let me put it on top of a white paper here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. It has, it's clear, and it has red lines at all of the increments, both this way and this way in your inch. So you can see half an inch, you can see a quarter inch, and then these tiny squares are the 1/8 inch marks. So this is going to help us figure out our dimensions. And what I like about this clear ruler is that you can see your stitching through it. So you can see where your stitching lines up. So I'm going to find the widest point of my stitching, and I figure an 1/8 inch is probably good, but when I look over here, it's so close to 4 inches that what I'm going to do is I'm just going to even that out and call our width 4 inches. And then once I have my piece and I'm centering it, I can make sure it's centered. And then our height, in a similar way, I'm going to start with an 1/8 of an inch on the top, but you can see if we call this 3 inches, it's not quite wide enough. So let's go ahead to 3 1/4. And then again, we'll just even that out once we have our piece and we're applying it to our mat board. So for our unicorn, we want a shape, or we're going to at least start with a square that is 4 inches by 3 1/4 inches. So I'm going to grab my paper again and just make myself a paper pattern. Again, if you are stitching the Magical Menagerie piece, then you will have the templates already for this and you won't need to make your own pattern. But if you're using this tutorial for another stitch, then you can follow this part to figure it out. So remember, I said 4 inches by 3 1/4, so I'm going to line up the edge of my paper with 4 inches and line up the edge of my paper here with the top of the ruler. And I'm just going to make a line at the end to be 4 inches. And then I'm going to do the same thing except find the 3 1/4 mark here. So let's line it up with the edge on the 3 1/4 mark, and then I can turn the corner down here at the edge of my ruler. And I melted the corner of this, so I'm just going to flip it over so I have a little bit of a better corner to line up. And here we have our basic square template. Now, you'll notice on the griffin that to echo the top of the cage, I've curved the top, and the griffin was super easy because I had these little trim rolls and they lined up with my pattern just about, you know, the exact width. So I was able to just trace that curve and get the top line of my ornament here. And unfortunately with the unicorn, we're not quite so lucky. As you can see, this is not gonna work. So I have to find another way to curve the top of my piece. So what I did is I cut out my square just with paper scissors. And I'm going to fold it in half because I want to find the center part of my ornament, the center of the top, so that I can get an even curve on both sides. I'll go ahead and mark that with my pencil. And I'm going to bring my unicorn back here and line up the center of my pattern with the center of my stitch here. And then I'm going to, I can kind of, if I push down, I can feel where my stitching is, and I'm going to line this up to where it's even on the top and the bottom where my stitching is. And we'll peek under there. You can see that, and you can see it here. And I'm going to do the same on the sides. I'm going to find that point where the stitching is, and on one side of this I'm going to mark where that widest stitch ended up. It ended up about here. So the next thing that I'm going to do in order to get my curve on top of my unicorn cage is I'm going to at first just make a diagonal line connecting these 2 points. So this is where I want to start at the tallest point, and I want to end up down here. And then I'm just going to make a gently curved line all the way down. And if you have a square ornament, then that's going to make things even easier for you. You're not going to have to deal with this. So after that, you can fold it back in half, cut this to where it's even. And I'm not being particularly careful with this pattern because I've actually already made a pattern that will fit the unicorn. The one thing that you do want to do once you have roughly cut your pattern is you want to lay it down over your stitching and just make sure that where the stitching meets the edges you are happy with. And you can see here I actually did kind of a rubbing on my stitch. I took my pencil and took it down along the top of the unicorn roof, and it looks like that the edge of the unicorn roof is going to end up here. And I thought, that's great. So here is my pattern for my unicorn cage. We have another creature that we're doing today, the phoenix. However, I have already cut out the mat board for that and drawn the pattern, so we're going to skip that step. This is a mat board that you can find at most of the craft stores that offer custom framing especially, and this is black on one side and white on the other. But it doesn't particularly matter what color you use because, well, I like to use white because it's neutral, but you might want to use black if you want, like, you know, try it out, experiment. I framed a piece with black that I wanted to have more of a darker feel to it, and even though you can't really see it, it is a little bit of a difference in the holes of the fabric. But we're going to cover this with batting in just a moment anyway. So here's my mat board. I just cut off a little piece. It comes in large sheets. And I'm going to go ahead and line up my unicorn edge with the straight edges here. And I'm going to trace out my pattern with my pencil. So after I have my pattern traced out, we're going to cut the mat board. Now, mat board can be very tricky to cut with just normal scissors, and so what I'm going to actually use is this. It's an Olfa blade, which is a type of craft knife. These blades come, they're the kind of snap-off blades, so once the top of your blade gets dull, then you can just snap it off, and then you can have a sharper blade. And these come, you can buy replacement blades to switch out. So I don't need it that long. I'm going to just open it up about this big, and then I'm going to, if you have straight edges, I highly suggest you line up your ruler to your edge, and then use your ruler to help you make sure that you have a straight edge. And you want a cutting mat if you're going to use this, obviously, because you do not want to cut down into your table. Now, sometimes it's going to take a few passes to cut all the way through the mat board, especially if your blade is not as sharp as maybe you would like it to be. But when you do that, you just have to be careful you run it along the exact same path that you ran it along before, because otherwise you might end up accidentally shaving a little bit off on the inside or the outside, and it won't be even. So here you can see I have my straight edge cut. And now I just need to get the top of this. And again, I'm gonna try and put enough force on this knife to get it in one go, because I don't want to risk, accidentally making this uneven. And as you can see here, I am attempting to cut away from myself so that if this does slip, it's not going to go and hit my other fingers. Sometimes I'm not the best at remembering to do that, so hopefully during this tutorial I will be an example of safety as well. Okay, so here we have our mat board. It's thick enough that it's going to create a nice sturdy base for our ornament. And just to test that everything looks good with our unicorn on this, I'm going to place it underneath the unicorn and just kind of gather my fabric around to make sure I like where this is going to end up. So you can see there's the top. That looks pretty good. You can see I would say that's pretty good. And I don't want to cut my fabric until I know exactly I like what my base is going to be. So that looks perfect to me. Our next step to prepare our ornament base is to take these mat pieces that we've cut out, and I need to find my phoenix piece. Hold on one second. It was on the floor. Here is my phoenix piece, just as another example of how you can end up getting your base to match, test out how it looks. Here I'm gonna gather my little phoenix all around here, and yes, I like the way that that's gonna look. So our very first step, and again I'm using the white sides of this just in case, is we want to glue some batting onto our ornament faces, our top layer that our stitching is going to go onto. So you can see here I just have a scrap of batting. I believe this is just a polyester batting. I know that Vanna liked to use a natural cotton batting, and maybe that's safer for your stitching in the future, but this is something that I already had, and with the pandemic I am not terribly interested in making any extra trips out to get supplies. But I don't know if that's going to age well. Anyway, we're going to glue this batting, just one thin layer, onto our ornament faces. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use this glue right here. It is Eileen's original tacky glue. I use this at work all the time. We use this as one of our glues, and it sticks pretty well. It takes a little bit of time to dry, but it ends up sticking pretty well. And so I guess the method of gluing that I like to do to make sure that I have glue kind of all over my base here is I like to do thin circles. You don't want to get a lot of glue because, like I said, this does take some time to dry, and the more glue you have on there, the goopier it is and the longer it takes to dry. And this is the method I like to do. I like to put a bunch of little circles like this on my glue, and then I just use my finger. If you don't like sticky stuff on your fingers, you could probably use a popsicle stick or something, but I like to just smooth out the glue to where you have the whole surface covered. And you want to get to the edges of this so that your batting sticks all the way around. So here we have our first ornament ready for batting. And I'm just gonna place that on there and smooth it out. I'll leave that there for now while I get my second ornament glued up. Again, I'm doing the circle technique. This is just what I found works best for me to get kind of an even amount of glue everywhere. And again, I'm going to just use my finger here to smooth it all out. And it might be nice to have a wet paper towel nearby so that you can wipe your finger off when you're done spreading the glue around. And let's see if we have some space here that we can just stick this here. Yeah, that'll be fine. In this case, you want to just make sure that your face of the ornament is covered up. You don't need to worry about having any extra on the side because we don't really want to add any extra bulk to the side of our ornaments. So I'm going to just cut the rest of this batting off there so we can get to the point where we're just working with our ornaments here. Alrighty. So you can wait for this to dry, but because I'm doing a tutorial, I'm gonna play it a little bit fast and loose and go ahead and move to the next step, which is just cutting all of this extra batting off. So I'm gonna flip it over here and just come here to the edges and just be very careful not to cut into your mat board. You just wanna cut the extra batting off. Just like all the way around. And the reason for this batting is it's going to give your stitching just a little bit of dimension and floof to it, and it's also going to give like a consistent base underneath your stitching. Just going to give it a little bit of support. So we have a fuzzy ornament here, and let's get the other one. Just like this, cut off the bottom there. Cut off around the top. Let's get all the way around. There we go. Perfect. So here we are. We have our ornaments. We're ready to actually apply the stitching. That's going to be the next part. So you're going to take your ornament shape here, and if you hear any rattling around, that's Rhaegar. Oh, yep, here he is walking through. You're going to take your ornament shape and place it over your stitching, and this is an estimate, so you don't have to be precise unless that's your personality, if you really like to be precise about things. And I'm going to take my pencil because I just kind of want to do a light line. And I'm going to find about 1 inch out. You can use your ruler if you want to on this. 1 inch all the way around outside my stitch piece. And I'm just drawing a light line with my pencil on the fabric. And again, like I said, it's just about 1 inch all the way around. You can use a ruler if you like, but I'm just going to estimate about 1 inch. This is going to be the extra fabric that gets folded into our ornament. So once you have your vague shape drawn out, you can take your scissors and go ahead and trim your project down to size. So I'm just going to cut in from the bottom here and cut up, making sure that I follow my line so I have plenty of extra fabric to work with. If you have a square ornament, you can lace the back up. However, since I've got a curved top to mine, I'm going to be just gluing it because I have never tried personally lacing a curved piece, and I know that I can glue it and that will work fine. So here we have our ornament face, we have our stitching, and so what comes next is the gluing. The very first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that your piece is centered. Or pretty close to centered, because Aleene's tacky glue does take a little bit of time to dry. You'll have the vaguest bit of wiggle room. Okay, so this looks about right to me. And another thing, so this is just for the mini menagerie piece. Or if you want a hanger coming out of your stitching, because this is the top of the cage and I want it to look like it's the cage itself that's being supported, you can see here in the griffin that the hanger does come directly from that little loop at the top of the cage. Something that you want to do right now to make your life easier later is to take something like an awl or perhaps a very thick, big needle, and you want to find about where that is. Don't stick it through your fabric, but you want to find about where that is, and you're going to poke a hole all the way through your mat board. And this is where you'll be able to stitch through later to get your hanger in there. So just make sure that you do that before you glue your stitching down, because that will help you out later. Okay, so again, like I said, I'm going to be gluing this down, and I just want to get as close to even as I possibly can here. All right, I like that. And we're going to start on the 2 straight sides. So I've got my glue again, and I'm going to use my little circle technique, and I'm going to cover about 1/2 inch on this side in glue. And again, I'm going to use my finger just to spread that out, cover as much surface area, or a consistent amount of surface area here. And then I'm going to just fold down the fabric. And like I said, you have a little bit of wiggle room here. If you need to move your fabric around, wiggle it around. However, you might need to add some more glue after that. Just be careful. You want to get it as close as possible. Obviously, it'd be preferable to get it on the first try, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And you want to kind of make sure that, it's stretched out a little bit. You want to make sure you don't have any wrinkles. Your fabric is taut. So I'm going to turn it over, and I'm just going to put a little pressure. I'm going to pull down on this on the side, on the opposite side. Just make sure we're still even. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we are, because you can see this side is now shorter. So I'm just going to lift that back up and just pull that a little more this way. Let's see if that's better. And again, this is just a little bit of finagling. And you can, from the front of it, using your fingers on both sides, kind of pull it tight. Just make sure that you have it in the spot you want. It can be tricky, but you just work with it until you have it there. I am by no means a professional finisher here. I just kind of, figure out ways that I think will look nice. And do it that way. So, you know, this is all a little experimental, and, you know, flying by the seat of my pants, if you will, in this tutorial. I've only done it the one time on the griffin, but I think we're gonna be fine. We're gonna get this worked out. All right, so here's the glue on the other side. And again, I'm just gonna spread it out here with my finger, and then using all of my other fingers, just lay that down. Okay, I like what we've got here. So you can see that our edges are pretty darn even here. That's exactly what I want. And the next side that we're gonna do is the bottom. So the bottom, you're gonna have this extra fabric in the middle. That's perfectly fine. We're just gonna flip it up. And as you flip it up, you can kind of tuck a little more fabric into this top edge, so that you have a bit of a diagonal line here. And that's just to keep this from sticking out on the side. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some glue down here on the bottom edge. And rub it in, get it all smoothed out. And again, I'm just gonna slide the tops in a little bit and pat that down. And I'm pulling on the linen gently as I rub and smush that down, so that we get a nice smooth edge here on the bottom of our unicorn cage, because we want to make sure that this is a straight edge on the bottom of our ornament. Okay, here we go. Let's see, I don't quite like, it needs to be straighter there. And like I said, you can kind of wiggle it around, get it to where you like it. Okay. Here's the trickiest part of finishing an ornament like this, particularly one with a curved side, or if you're doing like a circle ornament, you could do the same thing. In order to get this top to lay flat, you can see we have a bit of extra fabric. We're going to have to cut some kind of little darts or little triangle shapes out of the seam allowance or out of this part to get it to lie smooth on the top. So I'm going to turn my ornament back over. I'm actually going to add a little bit of glue down here to just get this part to encourage it to lay a little bit flatter here. You can see here, if you don't smooth out the glue, you can get glue poking through, which on the back of the ornament doesn't particularly matter, but it's just something to look out for. Okay, so I'm going to, in order to get this top edge to lie smoothly, I'm going to just cut a little bit of this extra fabric out. Now, you want to cut to where you don't want to cut any further down in there, because this is a gentle curve and not a corner or something. You don't want to get any closer to the finished edge. You don't want to get much closer than 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to be very careful that when I cut my triangles that I don't go past about here, because you want enough fabric to curve over the edge without worrying about the cut edge ending up fraying onto the finished edge of your ornament. So again, I'm just going to cut some little triangle shapes And like I said, this is so that it lies a little smoother, you'll see. And very important, you don't want to cut too close to your ornament edge. You want to make sure you have at least 1/4 of an inch there as a buffer. All right, so you can see we have our cuts made, and we are going to go ahead and add our glue. You can see that I'm a little poorly prepared for this tutorial because of my glue storage. If you want to avoid having to squeeze your glue repeatedly to get it to come out, you can store it upside down, and that will help. But it doesn't particularly bother me. Okay, so you can see here I've got my glue all spread out, and starting at the edges here, I'm just gonna pull down, smooth out my edges. And you can see here that because of those triangles that we made, we can get this top edge wrinkle free. So that's the goal with those cuts. All right, here we go. I'm gonna press that down so it sticks. And then we'll turn it over and see how it looks. Alrighty. So I think our unicorn looks pretty good. So you can see here we've got all of our edges glued down on this side, and we have our unicorn ornament, or a good start on it. Now the phoenix, I'm going to do the exact same thing. There we go, the phoenix. So here we have our unicorn, we have our phoenix, and we're going to be working in layers. And if you check out our griffin, if you look at the side of our griffin little ornament sandwich, you'll notice that the next layer here is the trim. And I've picked out some appropriate trims that kind of match the metallic thread in each of these magical menagerie ornaments. But you can find whatever trim you like. It can be a ribbon. This trim that the griffin uses here is a silver braid trim. And I lined it up so that just the little loops stick out. And we're going to be using something similar with the loops for the unicorn and our phoenix. So we've got this cute purple ribbon, sparkly purple ribbon for the unicorn here to go with the sparkly purple krynic in the pattern. And we have this bright gold braid to go with the bright gold of the phoenix cage here. So let's go ahead and start with the unicorn. We are going to continue using our glue on our ornament here. And we're going to start, because you're going to need a little overlap somewhere along here, because you start with one edge and then you have to cut it. And I like to keep my overlap down at the bottom of my project. And so I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to just kind of, let's figure out where I want this to stick out. I'm going to go ahead and put a paper back under here so perhaps you can see this trim a little better. I'm not sure. That doesn't seem to help very much, does it? Well, hopefully you can see what I'm doing. I would preferably only like the little loops to stick out, but let's see. Yeah, I think I'm going to make it to where just the little loops stick out. And the way I'm going to do an overlap is I'm going to make it so that this ribbon curves just the slightest bit up, and so it curves out into our project in the very center of the bottom. So I'm going to put my glue down here. And again, this is a time when you want to be careful with your glue as you spread it around. You don't want it to spill out onto the sides of your ornament because that might end up drying and looking a little messy. Tacky glue, if it isn't used in big gooby amounts, will dry clear, but you would see kind of a clear buildup in the holes of your cross-stitch fabric if you get glue on the edge. If you do get glue on the edge, never fear, get a wet paper towel and just gently brush it away, because while it is still dry, or while it's still wet, I believe it's washable. You can get it off of your project with water. Or at least that's what I've tried in the past and have had a bit of success with. Okay, so I have my base point here, and I'm going to be taking this trim all the way around my ornament, but in order, as I'm working with it, to keep it in place, I'm going to take pins and just slide them in place and leave them there. Okay, so as you can see, I've got my middle point glued down, but now I need to get the rest of this edge on this side. So I'm going to use my little circle glue technique. And just going to come to the corner for now. Again, I'm just spreading out this so I have a better chance of that whole ribbon sticking in place. And I'm going to line it up so just my little loops stick out. All right, okay, so here's the tricky part. I have to decide what I'm going to do on this corner. With my braid, I was able to get it to curve smoothly, but this ribbon is pretty thick. So I have to figure out what I'm going to do. Usually I would fold it, but that's going to make it a little bulkier at our corners. So I might end up just like we did on the top, making a little cut into the ribbon. And because we're going to be gluing, we should be safe for the integrity of the ribbon to stay intact. I think that looks pretty good. Alrighty, so let's see, I'm just going to see where it's folded. I'm going to cut and leave myself, I'm going to leave myself about 1/8 of this ribbon uncut, because again, I don't want it fraying and breaking. But now that I cut out that little triangle, you can see that this ribbon is going to lie flat when I curve the corner a little easier. Okay, So as you can see here, we've got our ribbon out here, our trim out here to the corner. And I will go ahead and put some more glue down so we can get it in place. And I'm going to go ahead and stick another pin along here just to make sure that it all stays. All right, so let's get a little more glue here at our corner. And I don't want to do the corner up here yet because I know that I'm going to have to trim the corner again. So I'm not quite going to go all the way up to the corner, but I'm going to get up and along here. All right, here we go. We're going to get the corner flat. And this trim is nice because it has this line that I can kind of get lined up with the edge of my ornament. So that makes it a little easier to get my little extra sparkle trim on the sides. Okay, now especially down here at the corner, we want to stick a pin right in here so that it can dry. And then once it's dry, you can take the pin out pretty easily without interrupting your trim. So we'll go ahead and stick another pin in here just to make sure that we all stay in the right place. And now we're going to get the other corner. And we might actually, we'll see how the curve goes here shortly. But we might need to do some cuts up there too. All right, so I need to put another pin just right here because it's coming loose. Here we go. All righty. And I apologize if there's some parts of this video that maybe aren't in the perfect spot to where you can see I'm still kind of, you know, like I said, this is my first time making a tutorial with this setup, and I'm still learning and trying to figure out where the best place to show you guys things is. Okay, that looks pretty good. Here's what that looks like in the back. So again, I'm gonna snip about to where I have 1/8 of an inch left, and then snip just the tiniest triangle here. Doesn't need to be a lot, but just that little bit is going to make it to where it lays a little nicer. And I'll try not to clatter my scissors down like that again. I have a feeling that was very loud. All right, so we are now ready to glue our corner and start on the top of our curve here. So I'm just going to do a little bit because I'm not sure how this trim is going to lay on that curve yet. And I don't want to put down extra glue until I'm ready to use it. All right, I need a little bit of glue on the top of this ribbon. Oh, come on, glue. There we go. All right, let's flatten you out there. Yeah, that looks nice. And we might be okay. I think we might be okay to get around here without too much trouble on the back. Alrighty. Yep, I think we'll be okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the rest of my glue across the top here. All right, one more squeeze should do it. Okay, and I'm going to stop again just short of my corner and glue, spread that around. And I'm not going to forget my pin, especially here on the corner. I'm going to want a pin in there so that it stays in place while it dries. Yeah, there we go. And let's get around here, get around. Okay, all right. Hey, that looks nice so far. I'm pleased. And you can see that I use the same finger every time for my glue finger. And as I'm maneuvering, I just make sure I don't use that finger. I'm used to that just from gluing at work and, you know, that kind of thing. I'm used to kind of having a finger out there. But again, if you're tempted to use that finger that has the glue on it still, just keep a wet paper towel close by so you can wipe it off. All right, so here we go. I'm going to pin down. That trim so it doesn't move out of the way. And here we've got another corner. We're just going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut right where that fold is. And then cut that little extra triangle out of there. All right, let's get our glue in. All right, so I had a little bit of an interruption. I apologize for that, but in that time I went ahead and glued down the top. I did a corner here, just like my other corners, glued down the side, did another corner, but I did stop before finishing just so we can go over the overlap. So we've made it to our bottom edge, and now we just want to, just like we curved the top of this ribbon, we want to curve the other side so that it kind of looks like they meet here at the bottom, and you can't really tell that it has begun or ended. So the way we're going to do that, super easy, is we're going to put our glue down here and finish off the rest of this. Alrighty here, so we're gluing our circle glue technique. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of glue up here because that's where I'm estimating that this other end of our trim is going to go. And here we go. Let's go ahead and get the rest of this in place. And they're going to meet here in the middle, but you're going to go ahead and overlap that a little bit. And then that's when you want to take your trim and just curve it up and out of sight. So it overlaps a tiny bit, and then it's going to curve up. And then once you have it curved back in, cut the end off. So now we have our trim all the way here around. And let's see, I need at least one more pin, please. I'm going to just pin that in place real quick so it can dry. And then pin this in place over here so it can dry. Let's see how the front of that looks. Yeah, I think that looks really nice. So here we have our unicorn with our trim on it. Alrighty. So we're gonna let that dry because we're gonna need to take our pins out for the next step. But while we let that dry, we can work on our phoenix friend. phoenix with his trim all placed in and glued on. You'll notice that I did have to use a lot more pins to keep this trim in place. It was a little more fiddly. And now I'm gonna let both of these dry completely before we move on to our next step. Okay, we're back and our pieces have dried. The trim on our pieces has dried, and we're ready to move on to the next step, which, if you look at our griffin sandwich over here, you'll see is to get the back made and our sandwich put together. This is very similar to what we did on the front with just a few small differences. I put down this piece of darker scrapbook paper because I wanted you to be able to see the trim on the unicorn. It was a little hard to see before, but here you can see where the overlap happens, and then here you can see the overlap down here on the phoenix as well. So I just wanted to make sure you could see that a little better since the trim, especially on the unicorn, was so light. But yes, let's go ahead and keep moving forward with our tutorial here. We're going to keep using the unicorn as our main example and then finishing up the phoenix as well. So the next step is, like I mentioned, to get the backs of our ornaments made. So you're going to want to find your pattern again that you made for our ornament front. And you're going to want to find, and again, I was thrifty on this, and so I found a piece that I already had, but you're going to want to find a light cardboard. This is the back of a scrapbook paper pad, but I have used in the past like cereal boxes or cracker boxes or things like that. Again, I'm not a professional finisher at all, and there are maybe less thrifty people than I who know of ways to get a similar material that should actually be used for crafting. But like I said, I'm a little thrifty, so I'm going to use something that I already have. So the reason that we're going to be using this instead of the mat board is because 2 layers of that mat board gets pretty thick, and I didn't want my ornament to be, you know, this thick on both sides. So instead, what I did is I just used the light cardboard instead. So I'm going to go ahead and might as well actually line this up with the straight edges, so that way I have a few less edges to cut. And I'm going to trace out my unicorn ornament template here. Whoops, that was not a very good trace. Here we go. Doing a little better. So yep, just tracing that out. And then we're just going to cut that out. Oh, come on. And you can see I'm not using my craft knife for this one, I'm just using regular scissors. You could definitely use a craft knife if you wanted to, but again, I'm just using regular scissors. So that's my unicorn back basing, my backing base. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing with my phoenix template here. So you can see that we have a shape that is going to cover the back of our ornament with the little bits of trim sticking out just like the front. Just like this. It's going to be so cute. And we're actually going to follow the exact same steps as the front with this. We're going to put a small layer of batting on the top, and then we are going to glue the fabric and pull it tight and get the little triangles cut out of the top so we have a smooth edge on the rounded part of our ornaments. So I'm going to go ahead and get that done and kind of speed things up here so that this tutorial is not so long as it could be. So something to keep an eye out for is that the glue, this is a wet glue, so it is going to want to warp your cardboard a little bit. So to prevent that while this dries, what you can do is just put some heavy object on top of it. I am going to use probably this book, this binder of patterns that I have. So I'm just going to set that there and then wait for these guys to dry. Okay, so these are dry now, so I'm going to cut them out just like I did the first time. So next you're going to want to pick a fabric to back your ornaments with. I'm using quilting cottons for all of mine. You can see that I picked a piece of fabric that was gray with these dandelion seed puffs on them. And I picked this because it has a little bit of metallic here on the leaves, and I thought the silver and gray went well of the metallic used in the pattern. And on a similar vein, when I was picking out fabric for the Phoenix, I was able to find this red and gold fabric. So I'm going to be using this. And for the unicorn, I did not find any sparkly purple fabric, but I did find this purple flower, which I think is going to be nice on the back of it. So we're going to do a similar thing like we did with our stitched piece. Is we are going to cut out a piece of fabric which is generally the shape of your template plus an inch all the way around. So something you will want to do, and I probably should have done before I even marked and cut these, was you'll want to make sure that your fabric is ironed. I'm going to go do that real quick. All right, so here we are back with our freshly ironed fabrics. This is going to look much nicer on a finished product without any wrinkles in them or creases. So that's good. So now that we have our fabric backings and our cardboard backings ready to be combined, you're going to take the fuzzy part of your back backing, and you're going to center it in your fabric. And we're just going to glue it down the exact same way that we glued down the stitching to the front part of our ornament. And what makes this a little easier, while you still want to stretch it out and make sure that the fabric is taut and there are no wrinkles, unless you are fussy cutting or you have on your backing material something that you do want to center, we don't have to worry about that this time. So I'm going to pull out my glue and get started. Again, because tacky glue is a wet glue, it's going to want to warp your light cardboard that we've used on our backings for ornaments. So I would suggest, once you have your fabric attached, to go ahead and let these dry under something heavy again. So I'm cutting into the tutorial here because I realized something after I had already made all 3 of my ornaments. When I originally did my griffin ornament, I ended up poking my awl through the whole sandwich. I made the sandwich first and then put the hanger on, because I was experimenting with what kind of hanger I wanted to make. And I had originally thought that maybe I would have an entire loop that went through the ornament and hung it up. However, I ended up with just one, but because my sandwich was already put together, I ended up having the knot from the hanger on the back of this piece. I just covered up with a piece of fabric like this. However, after having already finished all 3 of my ornaments, I realized that if you put the hanger through just the top layer of your sandwich, the one with the stitching, then you should be able to make your ornament sandwich with the knot inside, and you won't have to worry about having this extra bit of fabric on the back to cover it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the segment about making the hanger of your ornament and cut it in here to before the actual squishing of all of our pieces together. And sorry for the discontinuity of it. I don't even know if that's a word, but I just thought that that would be a smarter way to do it, but I didn't think about it until it was too late. So hopefully that this tutorial will still make sense, even though things are a little bit out of order. Okay, back to the tutorial. Now, if you are wanting to finish yours like my Magical Menagerie pieces are, if you're, for example, stitching the Magical Menagerie pieces and you want to finish them just like this, then what you're going to end up with is a braid which is sewn through the top and then there's a loop at the top. The reason that I chose to do it this way, one, this kind of looks like a neat chain that would be holding the cage up, but also in order to get it to look like it's coming out of the cage, and in order to hang straight, I needed to have something that had a bit of flatness to it and something that was not going to curve. I at first tried to do a cording, but with the cording, because that was twisted so tight, it liked to spin to the side, so it wouldn't hang straight. If you are making your own type of ornament and you're not worried about it coming out of your stitching like this, you can use a cord, and what you would have wanted to do is stuck it inside your sandwich. So you would have taken, you know, if it was a cording that looked like this, for example, you would have put the ends together and stuck it inside your sandwich when you glued it. That way your hanger would come out of here, and because it is not coming from the front and because it's coming from the sides, I don't believe you'll have that twisting problem that I was having. So you're going to want to think about the materials you want to use on your hanger. A lot of times you can use extra floss that you have. If you have extra trim or extra ribbon, or, you know, just look through your stash and find what you want to use for your hanger. I am using the extra Krynic from having stitched the piece. I had my model stitcher stitch this up. She returned the extra Krynic to me, so here I am using it in finishing. So you can see I used my extra silver Krynic to make my hanger, and I picked one of my colors, the color of the little fringy bits on the griffin, and added it here as a real life 3D fringy tassel thing. So I think it turned out pretty well, and that's what we're going to do for our other ones, our other ornaments. So just think about how you want your hanger to look. And again, if you want to do more of a traditional hanger, an easier one, you would just stick it into your finish, into your sandwich. Unfortunately, once it's dry, it would be pretty damaging to pry it open. So I'll hopefully make a little note earlier on about hangers, and just mention if you want to do more of a traditional hanger to insert at this point. Here's what we need to make our hanger. We need, most importantly, a needle with a wide eye. I'm not sure that you'll be able to see this or not, but this is a darning needle, so it has a pretty big eye. I'm going to be able to get multiple strands of Krynic through that eye, which is very important. And you're going to need your hanger material, and you're going to need to pick an accent color of floss to wrap around. For my unicorn, because I have the purple thread here, I'm going to be using the B5200 extra floss that the unicorn was stitched with. So I'm going to tie it back to the stitching in some way. So the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to decide how long your hanger is going to end up being. This is a braided hanger, so I'm going to definitely need to add in some length to it. So yes, it started out longer than this, but right now my hanger, if you measure from where it emerges from the stitching to where the top of the loop is, it is 3.5 inches. And so I'm going to at least double that and use a 7-inch as my initial hanger length. So you can see here I have already cut one of my 7-inch lengths here of this purple Krynic that I'm going to use for my unicorn hanger. And this is another kind of choose your own adventure suggestion here. You can measure each piece individually, or you can kind of gather your pieces together and cut them as you go and make sure you count them. We are going to want, you know, you braid with 3 strands generally. Just a traditional braid is 3 strands, and we are going to have 3 strands of Kreinik per strand of braid. So we're going to want 9 total. So I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that my ends are together, and then as I go down with my ends, I'm going to snip here and just get 9 lengths that are all the same length. And as you can see, there's not much left after stitching the unicorn and making this hanger. So we definitely squeezed by with the perfect amount. Okay, so here we have all of our strands. We're gonna go ahead and split them up into our 3 groups. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And then the last group is here. And just to help keep these all organized, I'm going to put a small knot at the end of each of my groups of 3. So here is 1. And I'm making this knot just by kind of twisting the ends together and rolling them through. If you do a lot of sewing outside of stitching, or if you know, I feel like even in stitching, like if you need to anchor beads to a knot, or beads or French knots or something to a knot so that they don't just slip out, this is the kind of knot that you would use. And you don't need it to be very big, and you want to kind of use the smallest amount of your Kreinik as possible. So I'm just twisting it to where this little knot is just on the very, very end. Okay, so here we have our 3 groups, and with my 3 groups here, I'm just going to do another bigger knot on the end. All right, did I get it? Not yet. Okay, so here I've got my knot on the end, so all of these are together. And now I'm going to take each of my groups of 3, and here's a tricky part. I'm going to get these 3 strands, and I can trim them just to kind of make it easier on myself. I'm going to get these 3 strands of Kreinik into the eye of this needle. I kind of like to get them all lined up right next to each other and push them through. A lot of the times, sometimes, and you have to watch yourself. Sometimes, as long as you get most of it through, if you tug on it, the rest of it will come through. So here's my first group of 3, and we are going to enter our ornament from the back, and we're going to use the tip of our needle and poke around to find our holes. So I remember that it was about, you know, 1/4 of an inch down. So let's see if we can find it and get through our holes that we made for ourselves and end up on the front. And as you see, you can see I did make it through. It's not quite exactly right, but I can scooch over a teensy bit, or I can just use my needle at an angle and get through the appropriate spot on the front of our ornament here. All right, I'm a little low that time. Let's see, where did it go? Here we go. You can see I've made it through the the hole where I want my my hanger to be coming through. Okay, and so once I have the first group through, I'm going to find my second group of 3 strands, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. And I'm going to try and enter and exit through the same area, the same hole if I can. So let's see if I can shove these strands through here. All right, got it. And we're going to again come from the back. We already know where a good space to go in is, so right next to that I'm gonna push through and pull grouping 3 through. And you want to watch on the back. You can see I've got a bunched strand there, so I'm just gonna pull that back out, and then I'm gonna pull both of these through here if I can. Come on. There we go. Okay, so you can see we have just one group left to get through. I'm going to put all my ends together and stick them in here. There we go. I'm going to pull this back out just to give myself a little room to see where I'm going. And again, I'm just going to, as close as I can, stick my needle in there and hope that I can come out right next to my other strands here. Here we go. That's in one of my other strands. I don't want to be quite that close. Here we go. All right. So as you can see on the back of our ornament, we have our knot now. And what we're going to do with that later is we are going to cut just a teeny circle of our backing fabric and just glue right on over that. So nobody can hardly tell. You can see in our griffin, I took one of the little puffs and glued that on top of my knot so that you hardly notice it unless you're looking for it. Okay, so we're done with our needle for now. What we're going to do now is we're going to make our braid. And in order to do this successfully, you want to have some pressure on the end of your ornament so you can braid it and make it look nice and even. So you guys are on a box here, and I'm just gonna lift up the edge of that box and stick my ornament under there to hold on to it for me. All right, and so now I'm going to get braiding. So I want to get my groups of 3 back in. If they don't necessarily stay in their original group of 3, it's kind of hard to make that happen. That's okay, as long as you've just got 3 strands per grouping, you'll be fine. And I'm just going to do a traditional braid. Okay, once you have about an inch left, you have made it plenty long enough that we're safe to go ahead and tie a knot at the end of our braid so it doesn't come undone. And you want to just get right at the end of your braid and tighten up your knot there. So now we have our hanger, and what we want to do is we want to loop the top of it and secure it so that we have a way to actually hang this from something. So you can measure out from where it emerges to 3.5 inches and kind of fold over from there for your first one. But if you have one that you're wanting to match and make the same length, what you can do is you can actually pull it over and just double check that it's going to be the same length for you. And that looks pretty good to me. So what I'm going to do, and to alleviate the twisting problem that I was having earlier, I want to make sure that my braid is flat, and I want to make sure when I make my loop that I am putting this extra bit right next to the braid, not in front, not behind, right next to it, because I'm trying to keep this as flat and horizontal as possible. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pull out our trusty glue bottle again, and we're just going to dab some glue on the knot to get it to stay in place. Just double checking my length here, 3.5, very good. And so like I mentioned, I'm just gonna put a little bit of glue here and hold that together until it dries in place. And then we'll look into making this loop situation up here a little prettier with some extra decoration. So to tidy up our hanger here, just like we did on our griffin, we use the red accent color to add a little tassel. I'm going to do the same thing on my other ornaments. And I'm using the B5200 from the unicorn to add to my griffin here. So I secured it with a knot up here, just like an over-under tying your shoe type knot. And I cut off about, what would this be, a foot or so of floss to work with, just so that I have plenty to work with. And I'm going to start wrapping this, and I want to end up with something that's nice and even and smooth, and we shall see how I manage that. Hopefully I will be successful. Okay, so if we pull our griffin over, let's compare here, see how we're doing. Okay, looks like we do need just a teeny bit more, so maybe two more times around. Let's do one, and let's do two. And now that I've got it the length that I want, I am going to get my glue bottle out again, and this is where you want to have a light hand with your glue. And especially since we're working around an almost finished project here, you want to be very, very careful and maybe even squeeze it in another direction until you can feel that your glue is about to come out. And once it's ready, I'm just going to put the tiniest dab of glue on the back of my braid. That's going to anchor the end of this floss. And something that you can do here is you're going to want to hold this taut until it is dry, because otherwise it might pull away and then it won't be secure. So I'm just going to hold this in place, do one more go around like this, and then I'm going to cut this even with each other. And I'm going to tie them together into the same kind of knot that we had at the top, just an over-under top, or an over-under knot. So make sure I get all my strands together there. I'm gonna tie it again. Alrighty, here we go. And then just the very last step here is we are going to take all of our strands of floss and separate them so we can kind of have a little wild tassel on our unicorn enclosure. It's kind of a stall. It's a hanging stall, because it doesn't have bars in it, so I hesitate to call it a cage. Okay, so look, here we have two of our menagerie cages finished, and let's line up the tops here so we can see that our hangers are both the same length. I'm going to go ahead and get the phoenix finished as well, and I'll probably do that on a fast forward just so you're not sitting around with me here forever. And I'll pop back in when all 3 of our creatures here are done. Okay, so we are ready to assemble our sandwiches, and we're gonna pull out our trusty glue bottle again. Is anyone here surprised? But the way that we're going to do this is we're going to take the backs of our ornaments and we are going to spread glue over this entire piece. And then you'll line it up very carefully on your ornament, and then after this you'll definitely want this to dry under something heavy because you want all of these layers to get really squished together well. I'm going to continue using my circle and spread method of gluing, and I'm going to put a little bit more glue on here, nothing that's going to squeeze out when these are pressed together, but I do want to have enough glue on this that they will stick together really well, especially at the edges of the corners. So my mom has a bunch of boxes full of old photos here right next to where I'm working right now, and so I think I'm just going to slip this under that for probably at least an hour, and hopefully by the time that's done then I can pull her back out and our sandwich will be complete and our ornament will nearly be complete. So I'm going to set this underneath those photos. And I'm gonna go ahead and glue down my phoenix as well. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. So Phoenix is going to join the unicorn for a little smushing time, and we'll come back when these guys are dry. All right, everyone, it's time for a reveal. Let's flip over Griffin first, who we had in the beginning. We'll flip over Unicorn next. Here she is, or he, whatever you decide your unicorn is going to be. And then lastly, we have the Phoenix. So here we have all 3 of our completed ornaments, 2 of which you saw me make today. And hopefully this helps you finish your own magical menagerie pieces, or perhaps this will help you finish your own cross-stitch pieces into hanging ornaments. Again, thank you for your patience with this video. It is my very first tutorial video, and I have a feeling that if I make more finishing tutorials in the future, things will only get better. So thank you so much for bearing with me. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments, and I will do my best to answer those as you go through this process. Thanks again for being here, and happy stitching, everybody, and happy finishing.